everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 7 review of Them on Amazon Prime Video. Episode 1 through 6 are up as reviews on my channel, so if you haven't seen those, make sure you check it out. If you've seen them, thanks for tuning in. Let's get into episode 7 because it was a doozy. We have to start by following Henry because I feel like Henry is having the most dramatic experience. And you might say that Lucky's having a more dramatic experience, and I'd be inclined to agree with you, but because it started off with Lucky from day one, day dot, first minute, we're used to seeing Lucky going through some things. We have never seen Henry go through what Lucky is going through until last episode-ish and this episode. And he's usually really calm and collected, like I've said about him. And so to see this stark difference in two different Henrys, I think it's super important to follow him. Obviously, he was like the bigger character in this episode, so let's get into Henry. So we talked about last episode in which he attacked the white neighbor, the bystander who was approaching him, harassing him about his whereabouts and calling him boy and all these microaggressions and all these racial epithets or whatever. And so Henry attacks him from the back, knocks him down. I don't know if he gun butts him and just knocks him out. I don't know if he kills him, but he's on the ground and he enters a home. Now we assume that this is Mr. Bex's home based on a conversation that he had with the tap dancing man, the minstrel man. And so we're thinking he's gonna find Mr. Bex and kill him, and he's just lurking about the house, moving so differently. We just know that this is not Henry. This is not the same Henry we know. He's being possessed by something. And so he's lurking around the home. I'm thinking he's gonna like hide out in the home and wait for Mr. Bex to come home, his boss. But he ends up leaving when he sees his wife. I was so glad he didn't harm the wife because, all right, let's not do that, you know? So he sees the wife go one way, he leaves the house undetected, but he does not go home. He goes to a diner, sitting amongst himself. He didn't get done what he set out to do when he left his house with the gun. And again, this minstrel guy shows up, tells him a story about when he was a slave, and Henry's like, you know what I would have done, and the minstrel calls him out and says, you wouldn't have done anything, which basically is like that reverse psychology thing, which amps him up and says like, you're not about that life. If you're about that life, then show me. So I'm thinking, oh my God, he's gonna go back again to Mr. Bex's home and hurt someone, but he takes a glance at the police cars, the police that are standing outside that diner, and that just lets you know that something else is gonna happen. And so we cut to a scene where Henry is following a cop, following Sergeant Bull, who we know is a hidden racist, taking money from the realtor to keep the peace in the neighborhood, even though he has said completely racist things about Black people, so we know who he truly is. But Sergeant Bull is paroling for another reason, and so he stops Henry to ask Henry about, you know, the whereabouts of Betty, which we'll get into, and we see that Henry kills the sergeant. I was so disappointed in that. I just didn't want Henry to do that. I didn't want Henry to actually take a life. I didn't want him to actually go that far. I was hoping he would snap out of it right beforehand, but as we've seen, he snapped out of a bunch of things, and at this point, he just snapped. Since we just discussed the sergeant, let's talk about Betty. So we ended last episode, episode 6, with Betty calling the milkman, basically cashing in that favor that the milkman promised of her. And we know just because she just got slapped and she's basically frustrated, she has no money, she has no means, her husband's not doing what he wants her to do, her work against the Emerys isn't working, she can't leave, she's frustrated, so she resorts to calling the milkman to get that favor in, and he invites her to his home. Now I want to make sure I put a trigger warning before we get into this discussion because it quite possibly might be involved with sexual assault. And so after Lucky slaps Betty, Betty rips up her home in a fit of rage, right? And she leaves to see the milkman. And so the milkman gives her, you know, alcohol to relax her. And that's what we think is in that flask. But we see later on in the episode that Betty is not just drunk. As the milkman is winding up this rope, which we assume might be a noose, right? Because he said he's gonna do what Betty wants him to do. Get rid of or put down the Emerys, as she put. So as we see him winding up the road, we notice that she's drunk on the couch. She drank way more than she should. But when he goes to Betty and talks to her, he goes, "Oh, you're so small. I put as much as, I guessed how much I should put in there." And I'm thinking, you don't drink alcohol based on your weight, right? When we drink, we just drink and whatever, we know our own tolerance. But when he says that he had to measure something based on her body weight, I knew that he put something else in that drink, and he might quite possibly take advantage of Betty because of his fixation with Betty, his obsession with Betty. He only has eyes for Betty, and we've seen that a few times. Even the neighbors know it. And so it's really a scary moment, and I'm just hoping what we're thinking might happen between Betty and the milkman doesn't happen, because it seems like she's been through a lot. We still haven't even explored what might have happened between Betty and her father, and the reason why she couldn't even stay in his house overnight. So let's get into Ruby. We talked about Ruby and Doris and Ruby's delusions of Doris, but we learned that, Ruby has even more internalized issues than we can imagine. We know she's not feeling wanted or welcome at her school, but quite frankly, Ruby is feeling ugly in her skin. And a lot of questions came up about the custodian, why she was treating the custodian like that. She wouldn't make eye contact with him, when he caught her in the custodian's office, the way she closet, the way she blew up at him. I'm thinking, like, this is kind of misguided anger. What is her thing with the custodian? Maybe it's just something I'm thinking too deep into. But now that I think about it, it was a really sad moment. And I want to put a trigger warning in front of this too, because this might trigger a lot of Black women, because this is what we go through. Being made to feel like our skin is ugly. That brown skin is ugly. Doris, her illusion, called her pretty for a colored girl, which assumes that most Black girls are not pretty. And we know that Ruby is not just feeling alone at school. She's feeling ugly. She's feeling ashamed to be Black. They're making monkey noises at her while she's in class. Things that she does not deserve. Things that Black women don't deserve. And so when she's having this meeting with Doris, after they share a kiss and share a moment, and she just wishes that she won't be like her mama anymore, like she said. She doesn't want to be like her family. She doesn't want to be like them. And I think that's why she treated the custodian that way, because she doesn't want to make any more contact with any more Black people. She quite frankly just doesn't want to be in her skin anymore because of how white racist people have made her feel. How white racist people have made Black people feel that our skin is ugly, that our features are ugly. I'll just say that that's what was so sad about this. So Ruby wishes that she looked different, looked like Doris, looked perfect like Doris, which we can assume she means white. And Doris kind of changes her, shows her a mirror. She has blue eyes and white hands, but then boom, she snaps out of it and it's not real. So what does she do? She sees paint in the custodian's closet, white paint, and she goes and she makes sure that she can actually physically see how she thinks she feels. And so her white hands disappear. So what does she do? She paints her entire body white in order to physically look like how she thinks she feels, which is changed. Blue eyes, white hands. She's no longer Ruby anymore. She's more like Doris. And it was an embarrassing moment for her to, go out in this illusion that she's a cheerleader and that she's one of them, one of the white people at this school bonfire. And she realizes everyone's looking at her like she's some type of animal on display, and she snaps out of it like, whoa, something is happening here. Something is wrong. So this is significant because Ruby then goes back and tells her family that something is wrong. And this is the first time Ruby's opening up about not only school, but just what's happening to her too, supernatural wise. Now, I saved the most interesting for last. I saved Lucky's situation for last because just so much was going on in this episode. I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. Lucky invites Hazel to her home, and they keep talking about this baby Chester. Hazel keeps bringing up baby Chester, and even though that's not what Lucky's talking about these white people driving her crazy, but she keeps bringing up baby Chester, and I'm thinking, like, does Hazel not get it? But then we see them pray together, right? We see them pray together. We see that Lucky breaks down about baby Chester, and then Gracie walks in and she sees her mama talking to nobody. And then we see a little bit of the same way we saw Doris, we see Hazel, that she's not real, she's half dead. And I'm like, wow, is Cousin Hazel really a manifestation? Like, I thought Cousin Hazel was real. And then I'm second guessing, is Cousin Hazel real, but just in that moment, Cousin Hazel was just a manifestation, a delusion for another coping mechanism for Lucky. So if you guys are understanding what I'm saying, it doesn't sound like I'm making sense right now, but I don't know if Hazel's completely an illusion, just like Doris, just like the minstrel man, or if Hazel's real because she has been to her house in Watts, I think. But in that moment during the prayer, Hazel is what's helping her bring out her feelings about baby Chester and bringing out everything that's going on internally. And in that moment of the prayer, Hazel just wasn't there. It was a delusion. Does that make sense? What do you guys think? Is Hazel real or is Hazel not real, or is she partially real? Now, another really frightening moment where our fears might come into realization that maybe Lucky is too late in trying to leave, that something is going to happen to her and her family. We see that Lucky leads Gracie to the basement again, but she comes around the corner and has an axe, the same kind of deal with the dream from episode 6, and she actually confronts her daughter with the axe, saying that she's going to protect her. We see an actual manifestation of the Black Hat Man. This is him clearly. We see him. We didn't really get to see him as clear as we did in this episode, and we see that she's clearly being possessed, scaring Gracie. It was such a gut-wrenching scene to watch, and she actually swings for Gracie and misses and scares Gracie, but she snaps out of it and quickly thinks, okay, let me blame this on Miss Vera. Obviously, Gracie can see Miss Vera, so she says that Miss Vera was behind her and she swung and cut her head off because Lucky truly doesn't want to harm her family, and by the nick of time, she snapped out of that. So now, Gracie's out of there. Lucky's trying to get Gracie out of there. Ruby comes home full of white paint. I'm sure they have a discussion of what's happening, and they all come to the conclusion that they have to leave this house. Finally, they come to that conclusion. Henry finally comes home after killing the sergeant, as we talked about earlier, and so they all are on the same accord that something's happening. They don't have a full kumbaya conversation about it, but no matter what, we could talk about it later. We have got to get out of there. Now, over across the street, something is brewing with these white racist neighbors. Clark, who's Betty's husband, Marty, who is the neighborhood racist bully, and whomever else was in there. And they're thinking, what, house is torn up, Betty's missing. Remember, she's with the milkman. These Emerys have got something to do with it, and we're not going to wait for the cops to just, drag their feet about this. Marty's has a gun and is ready to confront the Emerys yet again. So they're trying to race and scramble because Henry just killed someone. The rest of the family want to get out of there, but Marty and them see them do that, and they're like, oh, they're trying to run, because they did something to Betty. And Clark, again, is being a little bit level-headed, but not really. He doesn't want to attack the Emerys. He doesn't know for sure if they have any involvement in this, but Marty, of course, doesn't care. He wants them to be involved because he wants a reason to take their life, right? Let's just be clear about that. So Marty goes to confront the Emerys, and he's holding a gun to Lucky, and I'm thinking, not again, not another moment where Henry is not present to protect his wife, because Henry's in the house and they're packing their bags, and he finds a box with CE in it. Now, if you guys remember episode 1, we talked about her putting the CE Chester Emery box in the basement for safekeeping, and I just thought it was mementos, like a rattle or a blanket or some notes or some pictures. Henry's fixated on this box, and it's preventing him from being aware of what's happening to his wife outside. But we learn that what is actually in this box is the corpse of baby Chester. It's so sad. It's his skeleton. And I was thinking, damn, they moved from North Carolina and they left that baby there. And that just came back to us. Lucky didn't leave her baby. She kept her. She just kept him. She just couldn't leave him in North Carolina and leave him that way. She kept him that whole time. That's crazy. Henry sees this. Henry breaks down weeping, so much so that Marty can hear him from the outside. That was such a crazy moment, such a touching moment. And I think for a second it even humanized the Emerys to these racists, and that's why he lowered his gun. Because whatever he thinks that he was about to go over there to do, he's not going to do it, because right now that family's going through something. This episode was just crazy to me, and I know it's only going to get crazier. We have 3 more left, So thank you so much for tuning in to episode 7 review. Episode 1 through 6 are up, as I said, and episode 8 through 10 will be up very soon. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks for your patience, and make sure you subscribe so you can see when I upload. Comment below and let me know how you felt about this episode. I really want to talk to you guys and kind of pick your brains about what you were thinking. Don't forget to like and subscribe, like I said, and I'm going to see you guys soon.